Merry Christmas Eve 2025. I'm Hugh Hewitt live in the studio. Not a lot of news today, and that's fine. People are out busy getting to their families, getting the last minute Christmas preparations ready, cooking dinner, getting ready to go to midnight mass or church services. Many of you are coming back from the 4 o'clock service, or getting ready to come to the 4 o'clock service where the kids will do the reenactment of the manger scene. Have a wonderful Christmas Eve. Be careful where there is snow. There's a lot of snow in Maine and up in the northern tier, but in California, it's a nightmare. Rain like you have not seen in a long time, and just be careful as you go toing and froing to grandmother's house. Don't slide off the street. Be aware of mudslides and all that other stuff. I wanted to begin today on Christmas Eve by reminding you that Christians are celebrating hope. They're celebrating the arrival of a Jewish Messiah to a Jewish mother in Judea, roughly 4 AD. That's what scholars think now. And it's all set. All of the Gospels in Galilee, Samaria, and Judea, a lot in Capernaum, some in Nazareth, not happy times in Nazareth, some in Egypt, a little bit in Samaria, mostly in Judea, and it's a Jewish story, which is why I want to begin on Christmas Eve with an appreciation for our Jewish older brothers and sisters. Dennis Prager likes to joke, when we see the Messiah, either we'll be seeing him for the first time or the second time, and one of us will be right, but we'll be both there together. And Dennis was able to do a message, by the way, with Marissa, and it was wonderful. But I've been bothered, and this is not personal, I'm not going to bring up any particular names. I have been bothered by the almost straight line rise in anti-Semitism around the world, and especially in New York, and of course, by the deadly violence, not just in and around Israel over the last 2 years, but at Bondi Beach in Australia, in Europe, in New York City. And anti-Semitism, I thought about it last night, and I made notes to myself. There are lots of books written by authors. Dennis Prager has one. I've talked with Dennis about this often at length. There are at least 5 sources of anti-Semitism that I come up with. Number one, people are afraid and scared of complex events and rapid change. Scary stuff happens every day. And people want an explanation to cling to. So some people come up with the Trilateral Commission is doing this, or the Bilderbergers are doing this, or Davos is doing this to us, or the old standby, the ancient evil, the Jews are doing this to us. Now, believe it or not, anti-Semitism predates Christianity, but it got turbocharged by the medieval church, Catholic Church, and John Paul II went out of his way, St. John Paul II, to apologize for that, condemn it, as did Benedict. But that, people are afraid, they look for answers, they grab onto anything, any explanation anywhere. Secondly, some folks are, sad to say, just not very bright. Some are stupid. They read anti-Semitic literature like the czarist manufactured protocols for the Elder of Zion. I mean, it's really terrible writing. It's idiot. And they fall for it. They think Jews are running banking or Hollywood or media, and they're doing it in some kind of a giant conspiracy. It's really quite dumb, but they believe it. Others aren't stupid, but are ignorant. They haven't done any basic reading. And I'm not talking about memorizing Will Durant and Errol Durant, History of Civilization. I think of one recent book. Barry Strauss wrote Jews versus Rome. And it's about the Jewish wars against the Roman Empire. The big one is 66 to 70, but there are 2 other ones. Before finally the Second Temple is leveled in 70 AD, and Bar Kokhba revolt, about 132. After that, they just drive most of the Jews away after they kill about 500,000 of them. The Romans do. Romans killed Jesus too. And at that time, Romans were so down on Jews, they renamed the land from Judea to Palestine. Actually, Syria, Palestine. And they had other prefects go and rule it. But if you haven't even read that, if that's all news to you, you need to do some reading. Third, that was third. Some are ignorant. So we got some are scared, some are stupid, some are ignorant, some are mentally ill. And whatever reason, mental illness gets into some people's heads, and they make Jews the object of their insanity. And they can get over that with treatment, but you don't understand, and you can't possibly begin. I think of the Tree of Life Synagogue massacre. That fellow was amped up on white supremacist, anti-Jewish stuff, and I just think that's mental illness with a gun. The kind that we are seeing more and more is corrupt anti-Semitism. I can't read minds, and you can't read minds. You don't know what's in my heart. You don't know. God does. Nobody else does. Not even the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. But some people are quite obviously making a bunch of dough off of being anti-Semitic. They make money to believe libels against Jews. You know, like they run the banks and they run Hollywood, or they run the White House, or they were behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk, or that Israel is an apartheid state, or that there's a genocide in Gaza. These are demonstrably false things. And to peddle them, you ask yourself, why are they peddling? Because the first four categories want to see their fears, their stupidity, their ignorance, or their mental illness rationalized and made coherent and packaged in the right way. So none of that's true. Israel is objectively the most important ally of the United States in a world of free countries opposed by the alliance of tyrants led by Xi, Putin, Kim Jong-un, Khomeini, Maduro, the gang running Cuba. They're a bunch of tyrants around the world, and they're not our friends, and Israel is. It's a nuclear superpower. It's an intelligent superpower. It has the will and ability to project power along with us, as we did in Operation Midnight Hammer. Thank you, President Trump, this summer. But on this eve, just a reminder, we are celebrating the birth of a Jewish baby boy in Judea to a Jewish mother, Jesus, historical figure featured in non-Christian writings of Josephus and, of course, in the Gospels. And later in the program, I'm talking with Dr. Mark Roberts, who's a scholar of extraordinary import. I think his best book is Can We Trust the Gospels? On Why We Can. But he is also a Dickens savant about A Christmas Carol. And 21 years ago, in 2004, we did a program on the Christmas Carol that got lost to a ransomware attack, believe it or not. And that happened. So he's coming back. I'm giving myself a Christmas present in hour 2 by talking to Terry Pluto, my favorite sports writer. And I'm going to talk about Conservatism, Inc. broadcast in hour number 2. I got a lot to cover today, but I wanted to start off by saying on this Christmas Eve, just remember we're celebrating the birth of a Jewish boy to a Jewish mother who Christians believe is the Messiah. And that is the reason for the season, and it's why I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. Now, some of you have forgotten the most important thing, Dad. You didn't get Dad anything, or you got him socks and a sweater. Listen, go over to besthotgrill.com right now. besthotgrill.com. My friends Irene and Rhett, Merry Christmas to you. Wherever you are, stay dry. They make these in America for birthdays, holidays, anytime. You go and print off the barbecue, the best hot grill that you're going to gift to Dad or Grandpa. They got sizes 1 through 5, and you take a picture of it and you put it in the card and you give it to them and says it will be delivered in January. And we'll learn how to work it. You got to be careful with it because from 0 to 1,000, it's not one of these charcoal things that you just pour charcoal fluid on until it ruins the meat and the taste. You know, it's chef style, the real deal. Best Hot Grill. The best grill made in America. They also make Rasmussen fireballs, which are great for redecorating with any Christmas money you get in your living room with fireballs. BestHotGrill.com. If you did not read yesterday, former Senator Ben Sasse's announcement on X, I'm going to read it for you just so you know the background for what I'm about to play for you, the exchange between Senator Sasse, then Senator Sasse, and then Judge, future Justice Gorsuch. Senator Sasse posted yesterday, friends, this is a tough note to write, but since a bunch of you have started to suspect something, I'll cut to the chase. Last week I was diagnosed with metastasized stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and I'm going to die. Advanced pancreatic is nasty stuff. It's a death sentence. But I already had a death sentence before last week, too. We all do. I'm blessed with amazing siblings and half a dozen buddies that are genuine brothers. As one of them put it, sure, you're on the clock, but we're all on the clock. Death, writes Ben, is a wicked thief, and the bastard pursues us all. Still, I've got less time than I'd prefer. This is hard for someone wired to work and build, but harder still as a husband and a dad. I can't begin to describe how great my people are. During the past year, as we temporarily stepped back from public life and built new family rhythms, Melissa, his wife, and I have grown even closer. And that on top of 3 decades of the best friend a man could ever have. 7 months ago, Corey was commissioned in the Air Force, and she's an off-at instrument in multi-engine rounds of flight school. Last week, Alex kicked butt graduating from a college semester early, even while teaching Gen Chem organic chemistry. Wow. And physics. She's a freak. That's what he wrote. This summer, 14-year-old Breck started learning to drive. Okay, we've been drying off the books for 6 years, but now we've got the paper to make it street legal. I couldn't be more grateful to constantly get to bear hug this motley crew of sinners and saints. It's not a good time to tell your peeps you're now marching to the beat of a faster drummer, but the season of Advent isn't the worst. As a Christian, the weeks running up to Christmas are a time to orient our hearts toward the hope of what's to come. Not an abstract hope in fanciful human goodness, not hope in a vague, hallmark, sappy spirituality, not a bootstrapped hope in our own strength. What foolishness is the evaporating muscle I once prided myself in. Nope. Often we lazily say hope when what we mean is optimism. And to be clear, optimism is great. It's absolutely necessary, but it is insufficient, Ben says, right? Not the kind of thing that holds you up when you tell your daughters you're not going to walk them down the aisle, nor telling your mom and pops that they're going to bury their son. A well-lived life demands more reality, stiffer stuff. That's why during Advent, even while still walking in darkness, we shout our hope, often properly with a gravelly voice, soldiering through tears. Such is the calling of the pilgrim. Those who know ourselves to need a physician, with a capital P, should dang well look forward to enduring beauty and eventual fulfillment. That is, we hope in a real deliverer, capital D, a rescuing God, born at a real time in a real place, but the eternal city with foundations and without cancer is not yet. Remembering Isaiah's prophecies of what's to come doesn't dull the pain of the current suffering, but it does put it into eternity's perspective. We've been there 10,000 years. We've no less days to sing God's praise. I'll have more to say, Ben Sasse continues. I'm not going down without a fight. One subpart of God's grace is found in the jaw-dropping advances science has made the past few years in immunotherapy and more. Death and dying aren't the same. The process of dying is still something to be lived. We're zealously embracing a lot of gallows humor in our house, and I pledge to do my part to run through the irreverent tape. But for now, as our family faces the reality of treatments, but more importantly, as we celebrate Christmas, we wish you peace. Quote, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned, for to us a son is given. Isaiah 9. With great gratitude and with gravelly but hopeful voices, Ben and the Sasses. 18 million people have read that. And go find it and send it around. Just Ben Sasse, BenSasse. Send it around. It's a beautiful pairing of the sorrow and the hope. Which brings me to the exchange between then Senator Sasse on the Judiciary Committee and then Judge, soon-to-be Justice Neil Gorsuch, cut number 1.
As you find it. So let's engage in a little thought experiment. 30 or 40 years from now, when you retire and hang up your robe and you're out fishing or sitting on the front porch of your surely lovely home, and you look back over your career, how will you know if you were a good judge?
Senator, that's a question I ask my kids every semester when I teach ethics. Finish the semester with asking them to spend 5 minutes writing their obituary. They hate it. They think it's corny. I might be a little corny. And then I ask them if they'll volunteer to read some of them. And people want to be remembered for the kindnesses they showed other people by and large. And what I point out to them, what I try to point out is it's not how big your bank account balance is. Nobody ever puts that in their draft obituary, or that they billed the most hours, or that they won the most cases. It's how they treated other people along the way. And for me, it's the words I read yesterday from Increase Sumner's tombstone. And that means as a person, I'd like to be remembered as a good dad, a good husband, kind and mild in private life, dignified and firm in public life. And I have no illusions that I'll be remembered for very long. None. If Byron White is as nearly forgotten as he is now, as he said he would be, I have no illusions. I won't last 5 minutes. That's as it should be. The great joy in life, Shaw said, is devoting yourself to a cause you deem mighty before you're thrown on the scrap heap. An independent judiciary in this country. I can carry that baton for as long as I can carry it. And I have no illusions I'm going to last as long as you suggest. And that'll be good enough for me.
That is a remarkable exchange. And of course, very few people remember it. I didn't remember it until someone else posted it today. Maybe Molly Hemingway, I think. Someone who's thoughtful like Molly recalled it, and Molly covers judicial nomination and Carrie Severino about as well as anybody. And what it underscores is that Ben Sasse asked a question, the premise of which was unstated. Are you humble? Because you got to be humble to be a judge. You really do. You have to be able to put yourself in the position of litigants and to be fair and never to put your ego ahead. You have to always put your ego behind. And then Justice Gorsuch with a beautiful answer. Paired with former Senator Sasse's statement yesterday, it's a great thing to think about as you get ready to go to church tonight if you are going to be a midnight mass or a late service or a 5 p.m. or a 4 p.m. churchgoer. If you're running there right now, you're driving to church, slow down. It's okay. You might be late. Sheep might be late arriving. Things might not go well. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Everything is absolutely fine. And Ben Sasse laid out the right attitude. Best work. Save it as best work for his toughest stretch. And Christmas Eve greetings to you from the Hugh Hewitt Show. From Dwayne and Adam and Harley and Danielle and Diana and everyone who makes it happen at Salem Radio Network, Salem News Channel. Merry Christmas to you all. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see I'm holding up a book. It came in the mail yesterday. It's a Christmas present to me. It's called Cucina Italiana Comes to Brooklyn. The author is John Agresto. Agresto's been on this program a number of times. I mean, to you, he's Dr. Agresto. He's a muckety-muck. He ran St. John's College in Santa Fe for a long time. He opened up the American University in Kurdistan at the request of the Provisional Authority. He's a brilliant scholar of the American founding, and he can cook. And John lost his wonderful wife a few years ago and set about cooking. And then someone recommended to him, you really ought to write a cookbook. He grew up poor in Brooklyn. I know because I went past Red Hook with him and Susan Metz on a train in 1990 going out to Coney Island. Transit police came over to us three Anglos. Susan Metz was dressed to the nines, and John and I had on Sunday morning. I said, "What are you people doing here?" And we were driving back at that time. I said, "Well, I'm going to stand with you, and you may never take this train again," because we didn't know any better. John grew up there. Changed. But Agresto writes this in the introduction. Despite the fact that Italian cooking today is all the rage, there are virtually no books like this. All the truly fine Italian cookbooks available today approach Italian food from a point exactly opposite from this book. They have raised Italian cooking to the peaks of fine artistry. They made it elegant, fancy, even delicate and subtle. Most have taken the cooking of northern and central Italy, Bologna, Florence, Rome, and used it as the highest example of great Italian cooking. And great it is. But it's not the cooking of the Italian-American experience in the New World. This is a book that sets out the food we Italian-Americans are growing up in the urban areas of America. It was, by and large, poverty food. At the time, of course, we didn't know it was poverty food. We thought kings ate stuffed pasta shells, and we ate like kings. We had spaghetti on Wednesday, not because we were poor, but because it was Wednesday. So let me turn that statement around a bit. What we ate was surely the food of the poor, but to call it poverty food is to dishonor it and understate it. We took cornmeal and pork scraps and made polenta with sausages. We took boiled potatoes and made gnocchi. We took flour and water and made spaghetti and macaroni, manicotti, and ravioli. We took the simplest and least expensive materials available to immigrants and transformed those ingredients into marvelous foods that were the center of Italian life. The food in this book is what made the kitchen and the table the center of the Italian-American life for 4 or 5 stupendous generations. I don't wish to overstate the matter, but this was the food Joe DiMaggio and Martin Scorsese ate. So what I hope to accomplish in this book is to take the cooking that millions of Italian-Americans grew up with and reproduce it for the contemporary American kitchen. There are many true Italian dishes, everything from potatoes and cream sauce to baked larks and thrushes, that never made it to this country or into this book. This is rather a cookbook for those of us who grew up in Italian-American city neighborhoods, eating what is basically Southern Italian cooking modified by the American marketplace. Not a book to teach Americans how to prepare poached pears with zabaligoloni sauce. It shows you how to make a bowl of ziti like we had when we were young. This means that the first people for whom this book is written are not serious chefs looking to expand their repertoire of exotic dishes. This book is for the millions of Italian Americans who've left the little Italies of our cities and fanned out all over the country. It's an attempt not just to remind them of home, but also to help them recreate in the kitchen much of what they left behind. Second, since the food is so good and so basic and to be often so easy, I trust that non-Italians will find this book a useful addition to their kitchen shelves. In particular, I want to touch on all those who think they're cooking Italian when they reach for that jar of already prepared tomato sauce they brought at the supermarket. I want them to see how easy and simple and infinitely more delicious preparing something simple, like real tomato sauce, can be. To do both things, to reach the last generation or two of the Italian Americans and introduce others to simplicity and greatness of basic Italian American cooking, this has to be the book that's easy to read, interesting to read, and helpful at every turn. Not a book of recipe after recipe. It's a book, I hope, that explains what we're doing, the principles of what we are doing on each page. I'll finish the end next segment, but you want to remember Cucina Italiana Comes to Brooklyn by John Agresto. Cucina Italiana Comes to Brooklyn by John Agresto. I'm sure the 7 fishes are in here somewhere, but I'll finish the introduction in a second. Agresto's a great man. I got my Christmas present today in the mail from John Agresto, a friend of mine since 1985, so 40 years. I became his general counsel. He was the acting director of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I left the White House. I got out from underneath the thumb of our friend Ricardo, who runs the hot dog and golf driving range in Miami. And Ricardo was my boss. He sent me over to Agresto. So if I went from Ricardo, the Cuban hot-blooded, don't give the man any strokes, to the always energetic Italiano-American Agresto. So it was, Cuban to Italian. It was quite the introduction for the Irish Catholic from Ohio. Anyway, John has written this book, Cucina Italiana comes to Brooklyn. And I posted the link to it at Hugh Hewitt on X. Here's the end of the introduction. To do these things, to reach the last generation or two of Italian Americans and introduce others to the simplicity and greatness of basic Italian American food cooking, this has to be a book that's easy to read, interesting to read, helpful at every turn. This is not a book of recipe after recipe. It's a book, I hope, that explains what we're doing, the principles of what we are doing on each page. Because I dislike all cookbooks that are full of instructions and not explanation, I try to go slow, explain the why and not just the how of each food, and do it in a way that's engaging as well as informative. Aggressive's a great writer, so it's going to be great. This is partly why each recipe is a narrative and not just a list of ingredients followed by direction. I have faith that anyone can read a few paragraphs, understand them, and then put together a dish without the kind of detail people need to build the next Mars probe. So, I hope I've written in a way that what is done is understood and not just followed. Besides, this food is pretty simple. As I've said, that's partly why it's so good. Although I know that many Italian American men think that cooking is best left either to the restaurant chefs or to women, I can't let them get away with that. I've intentionally tried to make this a cookbook accessible to men, no matter how inept they think they are. Honestly, most Italian American men are probably good enough at basic cooking. At least if you're growing up with anything like mine, there was usually someone around you cooking almost all the time. Regina Pisa, if you're listening, I think of your mom. So guys, I've written this book to show you that if you can grill sausages, then, doggone it, you can make sausages. Moreover, by now, most children and grandchildren of immigrant Italians have married non-Italians. People who think that gnocchi, might be abbreviation of the Albanian secret police. So if you want a grain pie or some homemade cannoli, you're going to have to read this book. Put on an apron and start cooking. If nothing else, it will make your mother happy. Well done, John Agresto. You know who else did good work today? Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Cut number 3.
Hi, it's Marco Rubio. I'm the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State and the Archivist right now, the acting archivist for the 47th President of the United States, the best president we've ever had, and it's an honor to be able to do this job. We have a lot of achievements this year. Let's start with the peace deals. One peace deal after another. India, Pakistan were ready to go to war, a very dangerous war. The president stopped it. Cambodia and Thailand, we got that peace deal put in place. Azerbaijan and Armenia, a war that could have started that would have been terrible. We put that into place. And of course, Gaza, that long war, nobody saw an end to it. The president got involved, brought it to an end, and with a plan for long-term stability and security. Beyond that, we went to Europe this year, and the president got NATO to do something no president has ever been able to get NATO to do, and that is increase their defense spending to 5%. Just a few years ago, they were at 1%, 2%, 5% for all these countries, an incredible achievement by President Trump and his team here. Beyond that, I'm very proud of the reforms under the president's leadership that we've done at the State Department. We got rid of USAID. We brought all that foreign aid under the State Department so that now, when we give money to countries, we know where the money's going and we know we're helping our allies and our friends and not just enriching some, third-party group that's making a bunch of money from your taxpayer dollars. We also help secure the border. That's been a responsibility of the Homeland Security Department, but we had a role to play, not just in the deals we made with other countries to send people back. We've got more countries than ever accepting their people that are in this country illegally from their countries. They're taking them back. They're also helping us stop them from coming here in the first place. This is a great achievement. So on issue after issue, the president has kept his promise to the American people. He's keeping us safe by taking the war to the drug cartels. The drug cartels that are poisoning and killing our people, President Trump, he promised to do it, and he's stopping them. He's doing it. He's keeping his promise to you. 2026 is going to bring more challenges, but we have a great president and a great team that he's built, and we can't wait to see the exciting achievements of the year to come. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year to everybody. The best is yet to come.
I think he's right, by the way. I think that it's a remarkable takeoff for Trump 2.0. 4.3% GDP growth. And there are a lot of reasons why it's not going to last or why it's aberrational and why the tariffs are still terrible. And look, the bottom line is 4 point. It's like the NFL. Wins and losses. Don't care how you got there. 4.3% GDP is a lot better than the Biden economy. we've got unfolding scandals that should cripple the Democrats. I'm not sure they will in Minnesota and California. We've got Operation Midnight Hammer, which guarantees that President Trump's second term is a success, though I think he's probably going to have to follow it up unless the Iranians stop right now. There is a brutal internal debate in Israel. I was just looking at the Times of Israel website over the commission into October 7th and whether it's going to be political. It's not going to be appointed by the Supreme Court, that's for sure. Don't know what's going to happen there. Markets are close to the close and they're a little bit up on this July 24th, but again, it's a day of light trading. You can't really extrapolate anything from it because people, normal people, the people to whom I talk to every day, this is a normie radio. I was listening to Mary Catherine Am. Vic Mattis was not in today, and she had her buddy from Colorado whose name is escaping me, and they were getting into the knockdown drag out in the conservosphere. I'm going to talk about that generally next hour at the opening segment, but I don't really want to get too much into it. But here's the deal. 1-800-520-1234. Harley, open up the lines. You get to predict, will it be a good year or a bad year in 2026? I'll be back after Kurt Schlichter's in for me on the 26th through the 31st of December as I move from the East Coast to the West Coast. Hopefully the rain stops. But if you want to make a prediction about that, or we'll check in with the one big news story of the day is that California might slide into the it's raining so much and snowing so much. Dwayne's going to go outside and check during the break. I really don't want to leave cold Virginia and go back to wet California. To everyone on the West Coast, watch out. Reading from the LA Times, a flood watch has been extended through Thursday for almost all of Southern California, while much of the rest of the state will remain under a flood watch until at least Friday. A mandatory evacuation order has been issued for Orange County Canyon communities. Evacuation warnings have been issued for San Bernardino Mountain communities. The American Red Cross opened up an evacuation center in Palmdale, Stevenson Ranch, Monrovia, and LA. The first burst of heavier rain arrived overnight Tuesday and will be followed by a possible second belt Wednesday morning, which could elevate the risk of flooding and mudslides. Southern California's coastal areas and valleys are forecast to get anywhere from 4 to 6 inches of rain tonight through Saturday.
We're supposed to get 8 this week total.
Okay, one more data point from the LA Times. In the foothills and mountains, totals will reach even higher, up to 10 inches. And of course, Dwayne, in his infinite wisdom, after the show today, will be doing what?
I'm going to Disneyland.
It's exactly what I would do when.
Yes.
This sounds like the mother of all.
Well,
what do they call these Pacific rivers or river? What's the new term?
The climate change term is called an atmospheric river. I'll tell
That's
you what.
it.
I'll tell you
Instead
what it
of a
actually
rainstorm.
is. It's a Pineapple Express is what it is.
That's what we used to call it, but it's a rainstorm. So
It's rain is what it is.
and is it going to be raining when I get? It's Kurt Schlichter's birthday today, by the way. Happy birthday, Colonel Kurt.
It's also my miscellaneous random person mail edition's birthday as well, and that's why we're going. He wants to celebrate his birthday.
Happy
there,
birthday! Is it Harley or Adam's birthday?
No.
Okay, just check it. It's not Jesus' birthday till midnight. I want to say though, I don't know. Will the park run at full speed when it's dumping gallons of water?
It will run full speed. Now, not everything will be necessary.
Are you going to get your 50th time in going around It's a Small World?
No. Actually, I went on it already this season.
No, you got 49 in. We have that on audio.
I have my 50.
I have to say, everyone be safe out there. Will it be over by the time I get there on the 27th late?
Yeah, actually it should be.
Good.
It'll wrap up. But there's another chance on New Year's, but it's kind of a small chance, and then who knows where we go the rest of January and February. But most of the rain I think we're going to get is going to be in the next few days.
And will it, by the way, this is a big storm. I mean, California doesn't do this well, and the best drivers in the world are in California, but they don't do this well.
We don't drive well when the sun's out.
Oh, when the underpasses are flooded.
Yes.
So just slow down. You don't need to get to grandmother's house. Come right back. I got Terry Pluto coming up next hour after I tell you about the big picture on the conservosphere. Center right to hard right to unacceptable. It's unacceptable in the GOP or the conservative movement to be anti-Semitic, unacceptable to be racist, unacceptable to be conspiracy-driven. But not many people are. And I'll explain it all for you coming up on Christmas Eve 2025. I love the Christmas Eve show, I really do. I have a special little monologue here, a little 8-minute, 9-minute bit that I've been thinking about. And I'm not mentioning any names. I'm just giving you the overlay of American conservative media 2025 heading into 2026. You cannot know where we're going if you don't know where we've been. I got into this game in 1990, right? 1 year after the first mall was built. First mall in America that was built intentionally to be a mall is the Eastwood Mall in Niles, Ohio. We kind of lived it. We were excited. It was the first one. Now, they repurposed some old malls, but the first made-to-order mall was Eastwood Mall in Niles, Ohio. The first made-to-order mall for conservative media was talk radio, and Rush built it. At the start, when I was working weekends and Dwayne was working for Duffy, and there were some talk shows on Christian stations, we had storefronts. I got an anchor store along with Mark Levin and Dennis Prager and Michael Medved, and there are a few other guys who had anchor stores. But I had an anchor store from 2000 forward, the Nordstroms of the Rush Mall. But Rush built the mall for talk radio. Then along comes the Mall of America. Okay, this is a metaphor. We're going to lose all the Steelers fans. The metaphor. The Mall of America is Fox News. And it launches 1,000 ships, and it's got more offshoots. You know, the Salem News Channel you're watching right now, every over-the-top, smaller effort, everyone that's bigger, Newsmax, One News Nation, OANN, every different thing. That's all because Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch went to Roger Ailes and said, what do you want to do? Or Roger Ailes went to Rupert Murdoch and said, what do you want to do? They built Fox. That's the Mall of America. That's the biggest footprint. Right now, the biggest name in media is Brett Baer, and a lot of big names in conservative media like Megyn Kelly, who you ought to listen to every day. Megyn's got a big storefront that's in the Mall of America that wasn't there originally. She was a host in the Mall of America's main store, but then she leased some space there, and she's doing quite well. It's got podcasters, it's got talk radio, it's got all sorts of different things in it, but the Mall of America belongs to Fox News. They built it. All honor to Jefferson. As Lincoln said, all honor to Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes for building Fox News. Then there is, metaphor extension, the South Coast Plaza / Fashion Island of malls. Now, if you don't know what those are, they're the highest end malls in America. They're both in Orange County. And I say that with actual knowledge as to per square foot over a certain level. Costs more to lease in either South Coast Plaza or Fashion Island or anywhere else in America. It's a place you got to go to kind of really understand it. It is consumerism at its highest degree. It's the biggest stores, the biggest brand names, the biggest everything. And that mall is Hillsdale College, hillsdale.edu. They built the intellectual superstructure. They are, I call them the Lantern of the North. That is originally Elgin Cathedral in the north of England that was repeatedly burned down by the Vikings, and they kept building it up. Hillsdale's never been burned down, but Dr. Larry Arnn is building it up. As you come to the end of your year giving, remember, Hillsdale has done more quietly for the superstructure of intellectual America, the conservative movement. Leo Strauss lives there. Leo Strauss really began the renewal, and William F. Buckley picked it up, and it spread out the commentary, and it spread out everywhere. Hillsdale is it. It is turning out the graduates. The Ivy League have collapsed into ideological incoherence and anti-everything, anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, anti-seriousness. But we got Hillsdale College, and it's birthed a bunch of people like the University of Austin. It's a great thing. There are lots of, Colorado Christian College run by our friend Eric Hogue. We've got Benedictine College in Kansas. But Hillsdale set the model, set the standard, and Dr. Arnn raised it up higher and higher. Those are the three big superstructures of conservative thought. And my monologue to you, my push to you is, you can get in, but there's no guarantee you get to stay. First of all, we're all mortal. We all go to the Lord or not. at the end. And Rush went first. He built the first mall, he went first. And then Roger Ailes went. And maybe I got that reversed. But Rupert's still here. He'll probably start something new in the meantime. And I didn't mention the Wall Street Journal editorial page or National Review or the little things, the American Scholar essays by Joseph Epstein. There were books, there was Hayek, there were some teachers like Harvey Mansfield and Harry Jaffa and Leo Strauss. There were good things going on, but to scale, to change the intellectual superstructure of America, those three things. Talk radio, Fox Television, Hillsdale College, and the malls that they built around them. And all I'm here to, I'm not, on Christmas Eve, I'm generous. I'm not bagging on anyone. But all I want you to know is that people work to get into there. And there are a lot of great people. I did a listing of young podcasters and young influencers, and it's always going to turn over, right? My lease will eventually run out, and I'll be gone. And no one will remember me. I'd like the clip I played earlier, Neil Gorsuch. I have no illusion that no one will care. People remember Rush. People remember Fox News. People will always know Hillsdale, Leo Strauss, Harry Jaffa, Harvey Mansfield, Larry Arndt. They'll always remember that. But most people aren't remembered, certainly not broadcasters. I mean, really. Yeah, you got to know. You're not that influential. But that's the intellectual superstructure. And you can get thrown out of that if you break the terms of the lease. If you do damage to the mall, you get thrown out of that. And I think that's what 2026 is going to be about, making the malls bigger and making sure they're clean and safe and people want to be there, right? And I mean, it doesn't mean reverence. I think the Ruthless Podcast has got the anchor store in broadcast now over at the Mall of America. They built a second little Mall of America, like the amusement park at the Mall of America, but it's real. That's what I want you to know. That's the intellectual superstructure of the center right to conservatism, to real conservatism that remains within the movement, and then beyond that, beware there be dragons. Let me remind you that we are sponsored by my friends andrewandtodd.com. I want to slow down here and tell you as we approach the end of the year, one of my children is again doing a loan with Andrew Del Rey. And because of trust. Because we trust him as a family. We trust him as a show. I did my loan with him when we came back here, the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I. Dwayne did his. Lots of people in Salem. But the key is thousands of you have gotten your mortgages from andrewandtodd.com. They are a bank, Union Home Mortgage. They underwrite the loan. Todd Avakian has been doing this forever. Andrew almost forever. They have a great team, a great staff, soup to nuts. They'll walk you through it. They'll tell you, first you can call them up, 888-888-1172. And I don't know if they're working on Christmas Eve, but they'll be working the day after. Or just leave a message, say, Joe Bag of Donuts, call me. I heard Hewitt say I can trust you, and you can. Andrew and I have been in a Bible study for 25 years. Can't wait to see him in person when I go back to California for the next couple of months. And then Todd Avakian, same way. I've known him half as long, and you really can trust him. So whether you're a senior citizen and you're up against the wall and you can't make your payments, you got to get money out of your house, but you don't want to sell your house because it's where you live, reverse mortgage. They do that. You got to do it very carefully. They're very good at it. They're expert. Don't do it with Joe Bag of Donuts down the street. Do it with andrewandtodd.com and Union Home Mortgage. If you're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down. They do that. First-time home buyers, they know all about you. They can walk you through it and hold your hand, and don't be afraid to be dumb. Not many people know much about buying a house. Refinancing, a lot of you are going to be refinancing, and that's good. Refinancing is good as you start the new year because you might have a 4.5% loan or a 4% loan, but if you've got student loans and credit card debt and a car loan and maybe some unsecured debt, it might be better to roll it into a refi, even if it's 5.5% or 6%. Interest rates will be coming down. They will call you when it's time to refinance. My message to you on this Christmas Eve, if you're shopping for a Christmas present for yourself that's called a new home or a refi, do it with our friends Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian at andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. You can make it go faster if you go to their website, andrewandtodd.com, and answer a couple of questions. But however you do it, by phone or by website, you'll end up talking to Andrew or Todd or one of their team, and you'll thank me. Because no one has never not thanked me, right? no one has never not said they loved them. And I just got to tell you, they're fabulous. I can go on. How much time do I have, Adam? I can go on about them forever. Yeah, I got 40 seconds. I'm sure they've done 4,000 loans for people who listen to the show. They've probably done 40,000. They've been sponsors for well over a decade. But I just underscore andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Don't go anywhere, America. When I come back, my Christmas present to myself is I get to talk to Terry Pluto, my favorite sports writer in America, not just about the Browns and the Guardians, the Cavaliers and Ohio State, but about people that we take for granted who entertain us, sports journalists. I want to thank him, and I want to thank, through him, all the people who do all that for us across the political line, because sports does hold America together. On Christmas Eve 2025, I decided I'd give myself a present, and I would talk to my favorite sports journalist in America, the one and only Terry Pluto. You've heard Terry Pluto many times on this program over the years, and Terry's got a brand new book out, which is perfect if you get a gift card for Christmas. It's entitled, Why Can't This Team Just Find a Quarterback? And Other Thoughts on Life in Brownstown. Terry Pluto, Merry Christmas. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well, Hugh. I mean, look, Christmas Eve and I'm with you, so I'm good with that.
Well, thank you. I also want you to know we have been running a campaign called Angel Tree for the children of people who are in prison. I don't know if you do prison ministry anymore. You might be doing more homeless ministry now. But when you were doing prison ministry, did Christmas hit the inmates hard?
Yeah, and well, the homeless, I'll be there tomorrow night at the Haven of Rest, which is African homeless shelter doing the service there. We do it a couple times a month, my wife and I. And who wants to be in jail? Who wants to be in a homeless shelter on Christmas? Because everything just reeks of, you're away from your family or you're like into family mess. And so it's difficult. But one thing that's interesting sometimes is that when people are struggling with the same things, it'll bring them together. And you'll find that they'll be talking, really encouraging each other. It kind of goes two ways. Either people isolate or they come together. There's not a lot of like anger or anything. It's those two things.
Well, I think that's a wonderful thing to do on Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day, so thank you for that. And I was listening to Terry's talking last night. If you can pull your computer a little bit closer to you, Terry, I think the sound might get a little bit muffled there because your computer's distant. I was listening to your weekly podcast with David Campbell, the editor of Cleveland.com, and a couple of thoughts occurred. First of all, a lot of your correspondents do something that is rare in our country. They thank you for doing your jobs. And I got to thinking about the number of sports journalists who work on the holidays, who work around the clock, who work really hard. You got a Cavaliers-Knicks game to cover tomorrow. You might be able to cover it from your couch. I'm not sure. But generally speaking, do you think the public understands how hard sports journalists work?
Well, I remember years ago there was a writer. This was when I was at the Beacon Journal, and I was moving from being the Cavaliers beat man to becoming a analyst sports columnist. And this guy was a news writer, and he goes, "Man, I love basketball. I'd really like to cover that." And then what happened? He looked at the schedule. He goes, "It's like every weekend." I go, "Yeah, it's every weekend." I mean, you got to figure of the 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 2 of them they're probably going to be playing. They might have practiced on the other one. That's how it goes. If you cover the NFL, it's every weekend. The flip side is I worked in a food warehouse growing up. My dad worked at the old Fisher 5-year warehouse in Cleveland, and I worked there for, I think, 4 summers. To be certified to teach the state of Ohio, I taught 6 months at Lincoln West, which is on West 25th in Cleveland, tough neighborhood. I taught 5 classes of history and social studies and had 3 preps and a study hall. And I thought, I'll write compared to that stuff anytime you want, because that was real work. And this is, I mean, it could be hard and draining at times, but it's so different. And I mean, who else has an audience? I mean, you're the same thing. You've got an audience. People are care like what you say or whatever, whether they agree or disagree, they're actually interested. And that's a blessing. Very few of us in life on our jobs have people paying that kind of attention to us. And as you said, thanking them.
I enjoy Terry's talking so much, and you and Dave Campbell have established such a great chemistry that I think you could do it longer or more often. But it's already you're working hard enough. How is the new book selling? Which is another ode to I will soon be 70. I have no memory of 1964. And so my whole theory on the Browns is I don't care what they do, get to the Super Bowl soon. Do whatever has the quickest chance of getting to the Super Bowl, which I think means sticking with Shador and drafting Tate and off. Like you guys were talking like Dave was talking last night. I want to get to a Super Bowl on this side of heaven, Terry. That's all. I have a very small ask.
Well, it could turn into some very big mistakes. I mean, that's one of the things we talked about in the book, Why Can't This Team Draft a Quarterback? That led to, I want to get to a Super Bowl yesterday. Let's do this. I don't care that Deshaun Watson's facing all these civil lawsuits. I don't care that he hasn't played in a year and a half and is going to get suspended. I just want to get to the Super Bowl, and maybe he'll get us there. And, of course, then you get yourself back. If you think about it, Hugh, whether we're talking about finances or relationships or you're running a company, when you get desperate is when you make your biggest mistakes, the classic overreach. But I get the feeling, like you have, and I mean, I'm your same age, I'm 70. I do remember listening to the Browns in the championship game in 1964 in my friend's basement. By the way, think about this. That game, NFL championship game 1964, was blacked out in Cleveland.
Right.
Art Modell, the owner, had the option of showing it or not. For whatever reason, he was afraid they wouldn't sell enough tickets, so he blacked it out. And it was shown the following evening on TV. Now, people were, I think if you're outside of 50 miles outside of Cleveland, it was on. So people were like driving to probably around your hometown of Warren and Erie, Pennsylvania, and Columbus, renting motel rooms to watch this game because it sold out quickly.
My dad put rabbit ears on the television each week to try and pick up a Pittsburgh station. Yeah, that was it.
I mean, think about that. There's your chance. There's your memory, if you're a Cleveland fan, of the last time the Browns went to the final two, a championship, which is pre-Super Bowl, just the championship game.
Well, I think what you guys do is fabulous, and I like the fact that your listeners express appreciation for you and Dave and the depth you go into. Now, I wanted to ask you a question about bosses, because there's a guy who works over at Fox, and I work at Fox a lot, and his son wants to be a sports journalist, and I said, well, make sure you find out, A, are there any jobs, what do they pay, and B, pick a good boss, because if you have a bad boss, it's going to be a horrible environment no matter what you got. It's always the same advice I give to young people, always pick a boss. So I'm going to give you a second to think about that here, and then come back and tell me the best boss you worked for and why, because you've worked from Earl Weaver to Kevin Stefanski. I don't know if you can have two different types of people you got to interview, and then your bosses above you looking at your work, whether it's Dave Campbell or Chuck Heaton or any of these other great legends of Cleveland sports. I'll come back with Terry Pluto. Go over to terrypluto.com if you want to pick up Why Can't This Team Find a Quarterback? It's a great new book, and you're going to get a gift card for Christmas, and I would recommend, especially if you're a football fan, that would be a good one. Chuck Todd, a blessed memory here on the show, and maybe he'll be back someday and we'll talk just sports, swears by Loose Balls as one of the greatest sports books he's ever read, and Chuck knows sports, even if we disagree on everything politics. On Christmas Eve, and I'm giving myself a Christmas present, a few minutes of conversation with Terry Pluto. You can follow on X at Terry Pluto. Listen to his podcast once a week with Dave Campbell, Terry's talking. Terry, bosses in the world of sports. Who's been the best, and you don't need to name the worst. You already named the man who must not be named on my show. For 25 years, I've never named the man who must not be named, who took the Browns out of Cleveland. But who's been the best, and what makes for a terrible boss?
Well, in terms of coaches or managers, because there's two different things. Those guys are not my boss. Those are people I'm covering. But you can learn a lot both ways for how they coach or handle the team. Probably the best overall was Terry Francona. I thought was terrific. He was a combination of knowing how to keep things together when it feels like they're all falling apart, to knowing how to do tough love generally, it wasn't private, to being a storyteller and almost like kind of when the team's going bad, having some kind of parables to give or something to the media to buy his team and players time, and just a general feeling that this is a guy that is sincere when he was talking about players who've been cut or whatever. And I really liked covering him. Earl Weaver was covering kind of this eccentric genius when it came to sports. I mean, he's the man who invented the batting averages of pitchers and hitters when they can face each other. Until Earl Weaver came along, it was all just, well, right-handed pitchers versus left-handed, righties versus lefties, that whole thing. Well, he began to realize he would see weird things like a guy like Mark Belanger, who was not a very good hitter whatsoever, was facing Nolan Ryan, one of the greatest pitchers at that time, and he knew going to Hall of Fame. And for some reason, Belanger was able to hit him. It made no sense. So he had a couple of their interns in the PR department start going through, looking at things like that, different batting averages, and he suddenly found all these trends, which are now just given. When you watch a baseball game, they'll tell you, how they match up, and that
the
was
plus minus that you guys did on the Cavs. That's a new stat that actually makes sense to me. Yeah. Plus minus, I just never even thought about it before.
Right. If you have 5 guys playing at one time, you could sometimes see how a certain player, makes more of an impact than others. And also it could tell you could break it down even further of, all right, these 4 play together well, but when that 5th guy's with them, they don't. But if you put them with the 3 other guys, it can get complicated. But in general, some players simply lend more to winning than others, not because they're so gifted athletically, it is they fit in combination with the other guys that are out there. And those are Earl Weaver, by the way, today would go crazy with all the stats available. He probably would overthink everything because he was. How about, we have everything on computers and everything now, Hugh. When Earl Weaver had those batting averages of pitchers versus hitters and that, he kept them on index cards in a cigar box on his desk.
Like Ronald Reagan giving a speech. So, Terry Pluto, would you recommend, we got like 2 minutes in this set, would you recommend to a young person that they go into sports journalism now? I have lots of guardrails for people who want to do political journalism because it's kind of combative, and I don't think everyone's cut out for it. What about sports journalism?
If you want to do it, but I would recommend, like if you're in school, these people just get whether it's a sports management degree or mass media degree, get a secondary degree in marketing or whatever. I mean, the reason I went and got a degree in social studies and secondary education because I thought I might not cut it as a writer. I got to go get a job, and because there's so few. Think about this. I'm 70 years old. I've been a sports columnist. It's harder to get my job than it's going to be to play in the major leagues,
or to get into Congress.
Or Congress. Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Or if I want to do the Cleveland Guardians games. Well, Tom Hamilton's going to Hall of Fame. He's my age. He's 70, and he's been doing it since 1990. And his partner Jim Rosenhaus is on 20 years together. And
that's amazing. In fact, it's amazing that Mary Kay Cabot and Paul Hoynes and Tom Hamilton, you've worked with 3 Hall of Famers. I don't know if Herb Score made it in. He should have. Did Herb Score make it in as a broadcaster?
No, he didn't. But Sheldon Oker from the Beacon Journal was a baseball writer. So when I was a baseball writer in Cleveland, I had 1 Hall of Famer and Hoynes to my left and the other in Oker to my right, and neither of it rubbed off on me. But it's really good.
No pressure.
Yeah, but at the
Don't
point,
go
none of us
anywhere,
knew.
Terry Pluto.
Just knew we were
I'm
covering
coming
a
right
bad
back
team.
with Terry Pluto. His brand new book. Don't go anywhere. I got one more segment. His brand new book is Why Can't This Team Find a Quarterback? It's hilarious. Terry Pluto, my favorite sports writer, is joining me. And one of the things I like about Terry, and he doesn't make a big deal about it, but almost inevitably, character enters into his conversation about people on the field. And he's been impressed with Shedeur Sanders and the way he has handled this season. He's been impressed with Dylan Gabriel. He's disappointed by Clase, but character always comes to the top here. So, Terry, final segment. This is just purely indulging myself. I think Shedeur could be at least a top 15 quarterback. When Dave laid out Carnell Tate and take as many offensive linemen as you need or sign, I thought that might be the best way for this club to go. And I think you kind of agreed with him, didn't you? Stick with Shedeur?
Well, yeah, I would be willing to look at that. I would bring in a veteran behind him just in case, just to have somebody there. I don't like having two rookies or two guys going their second year as your only quarterbacks. But sure, I would look at that. Yeah, Sanders surprised me because with all the, he has over 2 million social media followers and all the hype there. I kind of thought he would be a real jerk, and he's not. You could tell he's been in the public eye for quite a bit, but there's this genuine, and I've used genuine 3 or 4 times in this conversation because that goes to character. About a week ago, he's being asked something about Stefanski, and basically it was a question to design for in the second guest as coach, and he smiles and goes, "Now you're not trying to get me into trouble here, are you? I'm not going to do that." I mean, it was a classic way of diffusing it.
You just mentioned Kevin Stefanski. I love the guy. Boring press conferences are us, but I don't want to change the system on a young quarterback again. And he's been coach of the year twice, and you said he looked tired. Wouldn't you run it back one more time and let him have one quarterback for 2 years with maybe 2 receivers that can catch the ball that split wide? Just one chance to run it back with one guy.
Well, I mean, he's in his 6th year, Hugh. And sometimes what happens in pro sports, I've seen you can be very good at your job and be a place for just a long time. Anyone will tell you when you're coaching the Browns, it's generally the worst job in the NFL. And the toll it takes on you emotionally and everything else. And a lot of times what I've seen with coaches and managers is whether they go become an assistant coach somewhere or they do some media for a year, sometimes they just need to air out. That's too bad in politics, by the way. They don't do that. See, there's imposed sabbaticals. There are imposed sabbaticals in pro sports, but you get fired. And then you come back with something else. And I've watched Kevin. He's drained. He's utterly drained. Now, so it's a question of where he is there. I would have long talks with kind of where are you in your life? How do you feel about things? It's well beyond quarterbacks and what kind of offense do you want to run?
Yeah, well, Urban Meyer was perfect against that team up north, and he still threw it in after 7 years because really there's a lot to life besides working 23 hours a day, 11 months a year, and then being recruiting. Terry, but all said and done, you've had a blessed career, haven't you? I mean, you've been doing this since you were, 22, 23?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think my first byline at Cleveland paper was in 1975 at Cleveland Press. So that's 50 years. And I was like 20. I did some high school sports for them part-time and answered the phone. And also to do it in my hometown, the job I have now, or being the sports columnist, the plain dealer kind of was Hal Lebowitz was that job for decades, and it was a job that I wanted. And I'm able to keep doing it. And I have a great boss and Chris Quinn and Dave Campbell there that allow me to, don't have to chase all these teams all over the country. My travel is minimal, and it still means a lot. And I love the fact that, Hugh, sports is much better than politics, because in politics, just say something, everybody runs into their red state, blue state thing. But all right, you bring up we bring up Shedeur Sanders or Kevin Stefanski, the opinions that come in, I don't think are based on like how you voted or want to vote.
No.
It's like the guy, or it's actually more rational. It's hard. It's a strange world when sports is more rational than real life at times
It
in
is,
politics.
and when I hear that the Dolans are cheap, I get mad. I think the Haslams have grown as owners. I think Dan Gilbert is a gift to Cleveland. We are blessed to actually we are sports rich, and then we got the Buckeyes down the road, and you have a great group of colleagues, and they're all working around the clock, turning out product. I don't know if they work harder anywhere in America than for Cleveland.com. That they're working all the time.
Well, welcome to the internet age. When that kicked in, all of a sudden we realized the Associated Press used to be you're always on deadline. Now anybody in any of these markets, you're always on deadline. And when something happens, even if a columnist like I am with an opinion, they'd like something within a half hour and 45 minutes, and please get it in within an hour of it happening.
Wow.
And where before it's like, okay, it could happen at 3 in the afternoon. It won't be until tomorrow's paper.
Well, have a Merry Christmas, and I have one suggestion for you on your next book, because you can't not write. So you want to be a sports journalist, because I have no advice for kids because I've been able to tell them about being a political journalist, but I have no advice on so you want to be a sports journalist. And you probably could write that book in your sleep on the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and why you don't want to do this sport or that sport. But you cover them all. You don't do much Ohio State, do you?
I do not too much. One thing I would say, whether it's broadcasting or this, people say, well, I want to be a sports writer or sports journalist because I love sports. That's not the best answer. The best answer
Correct.
is like, if you're going to be a sports writer, you better love to write. And you know this, even if you're going to be a political broadcaster, yeah, politics is important, but you better be very good at broadcasting. And a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, there is a talent. Joe Tate, the immortal Joe Tate, the absolute, and Gib Shanley. I mean, we're all blessed up there. Terry, Merry Christmas, and everybody else deserves a fetching Mrs. Hewitt and a Roberta Pluto in their lives as well. We're both blessed in that department as well. Merry Christmas, Terry Pluto. Talk to you in 2026 at some point as the Browns march to the Super Bowl, the Guardians to the World Series, and the Cavaliers to the final of the NBA. That's my wish for the new year. Take care, Terry Pluto. Follow him on X. His brand new book is Why Can't This Team Find a Quarterback? Funny, sorrow-filled. Stand by for next hour. Dr. Mark Roberts is back. I did a show with Mark in 2004 on A Christmas Carol, and we lost it to ransomware. And so I sent him a note. Would he mind doing it again? And we are ready to roll. Don't miss this coming hour. Brand new for everyone listening in 2026. You're at 2025, not yet 2026. I want to remind you, Consumer Cellular, all right, our great sponsor. Time for you to check it out. 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Remember, my code is Hugh, H-U-G-H. You want to use that because you'll get your second month free of whatever plan you switch to if you choose to go with Consumer Cellular. And you can have savings without sacrificing service. You can have them both. Or you can go to HughHewitt.com/Hugh. Either way, you'll get that second month of service free when you use my name, Hugh. But what I want you to do before you call, get your phone bill out, find out how much you're paying for data, especially if you're 50 and older. Consumer Cellular has a deal for you, 2 lines. Keep your data, keep your name, keep your number, but switch to Consumer Cellular. 2 lines of unlimited data for $50. Don't forget that second month is free even with that offer. Call 1-800-411-4454 to remember my name, Hugh. Secondly, our friends at American Legislative Exchange Council. I cannot wait to talk to them in the new year. I've got my new book right here, Rich States, Poor States. I haven't looked up Minnesota since doing yesterday's show on the Minnesota fraud, which got worse today. But I will. If you want to learn out what's going on in the states, those that can fight fraud and those that don't care, like Minnesota, go to the American Legislative Exchange Council and get your book. Go to richstatespoorstates.com, richstatespoorstates.com, or sign up for the newsletter on the state of the states. American Legislative Exchange Council, alec.org/Hugh, ALEC.org/Hugh. Finally, Angel Tree is underway. It's so appropriate going into an hour about Dickens. It's our last day. You've been wonderful. We're gonna benefit maybe 4,000, 5,000 kids because of your generosity. Special gift from Carol and Jan. God love you both. Angel Tree is still working around the clock. They'll be delivering presents tonight and tomorrow from children who have made out a wish list. They're going to get a note from mom or dad. They're going to get a Bible, and they're going to get connected to Angel Tree. There simply is no better way to celebrate Christmas than with generosity. That's something I'll talk about with Dr. Roberts coming up. Dr. Roberts is a senior fellow at the Dupree Center at the Fuller Theological Seminary. He's been my friend forever. I was a year behind me at Harvard, but he stuck around for 7 more years and got his PhD from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. He's a brilliant man. He's wonderful when it comes to homiletics, but he's also a Dickens enthusiast on the Christmas Carol. So you're going to love that. But don't forget, Angel Tree's about giving at Christmas. So, by the way, is a Christmas Carol. I think Mark Roberts will agree with me on that. Merry Christmas Eve to you. More than 20 years ago, I did a show with my next guest, Dr. Mark Roberts. Dr. Mark Roberts is a senior fellow at the Dupree Center at the Fuller Seminary. He's the author of 9 different books, hundreds of articles, over 3,500 devotions as the chief writer at Life for Leaders, his daily study devotional at the Dupree Center. These days, Mark is helping people my age in the third of life flourish. You can learn more at dupree.org. Mark Roberts, welcome back. We did this originally in 2004, and then the malware guys came in and took it hostage, so we're redoing it again for Christmas Eve. Have you kept up with Scrooge over those 2 decades?
Well, in fact, I have. I have probably listened to 2 or 3 recorded versions of the Christmas Carol. I've watched many film versions, including one yesterday. I've seen it performed on stage, and I read A Christmas Carol every year. So I've added more than 20 readings since we last did our show together.
Why do you read it every year? That's amazing.
You know, it is, and partly you can get away with it because it's short. If I told you, I read David Copperfield every year, you'd say, where do you find the time? It's a quick read. I read it because I love this book. I love its story. I love the characters. I love the language. The more I read it, the more I just find Dickens's language just delightful. Lots of humor in this book, including some suspense, and you might even almost say horror. The book has exceptional moral clarity, and I appreciate that in a day like this, and in a strong encouragement. But most of all, what I find deeply moving is the story of a human life transformed, of a man who was alone and caught up in himself and had no love for anyone, to a man who was a kind and generous, and it was a transformed man. And I love that story.
In the second 25 years of the new trillennium, or the new millennium, I got to ask you a little background, please, on this story for people who are driving around or watching on YouTube who don't even know what the Christmas Carol is because they exist, or at best they've seen the Muppet version.
Yeah, or maybe in this day, Jim Carrey's version, which is fascinating. Yeah. That's another story. Well, you know, it's the story of the writing of A Christmas Carol is itself a story. In fact, there actually is a movie that Dan Stevens was in called The Man Who Invented Christmas. They kind of tell the story of Dickens. So basically, this book was published in December of 1843 in London. And let me say something about the broader cultural context and then Dickens' own context. So England at that time was in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, great move to urbanization. There were major extremes of wealth and poverty at that time. The working conditions for even just average workers, not to mention lower class workers, were really quite oppressive and awful, often working 10 and 12 hours a day in really terrible conditions. There was a lot of suffering of children who were just not being taken care of well, not at that point being well educated by and large, especially the lower class. And interestingly enough, Christmas really was not a thing then. In fact, there had been a history in England of celebrating Christmas more like people in some cities celebrate Halloween today. I mean, with all kinds of pranks and rowdiness and even illegality and different things historically. So there was this sort of negative sense of Christmas. And so many, well, most proper people, but many Christians ignored it. And actually, some Christians in that day really rejected and criticized it. In fact, in the colonies, in Massachusetts in the 1600s, for a while, it was illegal to celebrate Christmas, and if you celebrated it, you get in trouble. So you have
the Puritans were not fun-loving people.
not by and large. And so basically, Christmas was this minor holiday at most, okay, and not something that most folks gave much thought to. That's Christmas. Now, here's Dickens, the context. In 1843, he was an acclaimed author, but he was facing financial challenges. His last book hadn't sold well. He had 3 children who were alive. He'd lost a couple. His books were also being pirated by many in that day and sold. And so he was very concerned about his own personal livelihood, but also because he grew up in considerable poverty. And that was a really bad way to grow up in that day. And so he was worrying about this for himself. In October of 1843, he made a trip to Manchester, where in fact visited his sister Fan, like in the book, who had a child who was quite ill, like Tiny Tim, interestingly. But he visited her to speak at an organization in Manchester that really helps educate lower class people. In that trip, he observed children in just terrible distress, poverty, and depression. And he wanted to make some kind of difference. And now he wanted to sell some books for his own well-being and for his family. But what he really wanted to do was make some sort of cultural change through writing a book that might do that. And an idea came to him for this short novel about Christmas that would encourage people of means to care for and to support and be generous with the poor, and especially to care about children. So that was kind of the setup.
I want to underscore, he worked in a blacking factory, an ink factory. He was in debtor's prison. He knows of what he writes when he writes about poverty. And do you have any idea where he got the idea for A Christmas Carol from?
Well, what's fascinating is in the Pickwick Papers, which had been written about 7 years before A Christmas Carol, there was a short story in there called The Goblins Who Stole a Sexton. A sexton is like the church custodian, okay? And the sexton is a man named Gabriel Grubb. He's a grumpy, lonely old man all by himself who hates children and Christmas. But on Christmas Eve, some goblins come after he's had something to drink, and they steal him, and they steal him away, and they take him to a cavern where they show him all kinds of visions of poor people suffering, but also visions of the poor celebrating. And also the goblins beat him up many times. And out of this, Grubb has a change of heart. He becomes cheerful and a lover of Christmas. But he is so embarrassed about this change in his life that rather than look a fool to his neighbors, he actually disappears for a long, long time and hides because he doesn't want to expose the change of heart. So when you hear that story, you say, oh, that sounds kind of like Scrooge, but not quite. But it was sort of the, you know how fine painters will have like chalk drawings of their painting before they actually do the painting. This is kind of the chalk drawing of A Christmas Carol 7 years before. That was kind of that core story. But then, of course, what Dickens does with it, with Scrooge, is very, very different.
So you said October of 1843?
Yes.
What did he do? That's a deadline if he's going to make Christmas.
Yes. So he started working on it in October 1843, and he worked feverishly, moved back to London. He talks in his letters of walking 15 to 20 miles a day around London, thinking, and then he's writing. He's deeply engaged. He describes himself as writing almost around the clock, sometimes laughing, sometimes weeping. He is completely engaged in this, and he finishes it in late November 1843. Now, keep that date in mind. His publisher, interestingly, is not enthusiastic about the book. They think it's not going to do very well. So they will publish it, but they're not going to put any money in it. So Dickens actually paid for the editing, the art, the printing of this book. He paid and was therefore eligible for getting better income if it sold. And so he finishes it in November 1843, and the book hits the stores on December 19th. Now, Hugh, you and I've written books. They want it like 18 months in advance, and it takes forever and ever. This was a turnaround of less than 3 weeks. It's amazing.
That's a miracle.
And
Yeah,
so now
our late mutual friend, Dr. David Allen White, who passed away this year, I did a 3-hour special with him on Dickens because of his command of the language. Do you share that love of Dickens' command of the language?
Oh, yes, it's really amazing. And and these days you have to look some things up, and there are ways to do that so you can know all the words. But
we got a minute to the break. So example.
Take the most obvious thing. Yeah. The name Ebenezer Scrooge actually has meaning. So Scrooge actually was an Old English verb that means to squeeze or to press something. And there's this description later of Scrooge of a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. So Scrooge, it's a squeezer. Ebenezer is a biblical word. It means help stone, a stone of help. It's a memorial. And so you have in the name Ebenezer Scrooge, on the one hand, the description of where he began and a memorial for us of what happened in his life.
More coming up on A Christmas Carol on this Christmas Eve. I can almost always get an answer from someone when I ask who their favorite Scrooge is. Mine is George C. Scott. And their favorite scene, and mine is when he throws the window open and sees the boy below. It's about a changed life. Mark, what is the draw of a transformed life? Why do people love that so much?
Well, and as I mentioned, there are many reasons to love A Christmas Carol, but mostly what really grabs us and keeps us reading, in my case, is this story of this transformation that Ebenezer Scrooge goes from, what I just said, this squeezing man who squeezed his money to hold on to it and really squeezed his own heart and soul and just was this squeezed up, bound up old man. And by the end, he is a warm and happy and laughing, caring, generous, and good person. In fact, the goodness is emphasized. Again, a great Dickens line. He describes Scrooge as as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man, as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. That's great. A lot of goods. But how did this happen? How did Scrooge change? Well, the most obvious thing is he got some supernatural help. In this case, not from God necessarily, but from the spirits who visited him. He didn't just change all by himself. That's sort of number one. Number two, there was this profound interruption of his ordinary experience. And in general, when we go through certain kinds of transformations, it's usually because we've experienced something unusual, something that isn't ordinary. An obvious one would be when you get married. That's a big change in your life, and it can lead to transformation. In my season of life, it could be you and I, Hugh, of one of our good friends just recently lost his spouse, and that's a huge change. Interruption. Okay. Number three, the influence of nostalgia. Now, when Scrooge is taken back in time by the spirit of Christmas past, he has this profound nostalgic experience of what it was like when he was young. And you'd say, well, that's interesting. What difference does it make? Actually, psychologists study this. There's a group actually at the University of Southampton in England that studies the impact of nostalgia on people, and especially older people. And it actually does things like opens our hearts and softens us and does these things. So nostalgia is part of it. Okay. Dickens must have known this. He didn't know the science. It wasn't around yet. Number four, there's experience of pain and transformation. For Scrooge, he had pain in his life prior, but it's re-experiencing that pain, the rejection he had felt by his father, the loss of friends, these hard things. He had to re-experience them again, and the pain of them, in order for his heart to be tenderized and open up to the possibility of healing. Now, there's a couple of things really important. Many times, Scrooge, as he goes back and in the present, he is exposed to children who are suffering, including himself. The first time he really evidences some kind of empathy in this book, it's when he's looking at his own little boy left alone at school at Christmas, not going home, and he feels
Right.
deep sympathy. Okay. Later in a letter, he wrote to a friend and he said, "Certainly there is nothing more touching than the suffering of a child, nothing more overwhelming." And so in this story, and Tiny Tim is the most obvious example, as Scrooge pays attention to the suffering of children, his heart is moved, his heart is opened up. And then, to the sixth point, he begins to see with new eyes. He sees what life is about with new eyes. He sees himself with new eyes. He sees the purpose of his living with new eyes. He has had a transform in vision. And the last thing I would say about this is he experiences this by grace, that he has an experience of grace.
Okay, we have non-Christian listeners, so
Okay.
let's explain grace to them. What do you mean by grace?
Well, I'll explain grace and then talk about where you see it. So grace is unmerited favor, unmerited kindness. I mean, for Christians, we talk, of course, about the grace of God, God's unmerited kindness. But you can show grace person to person too, simply giving to somebody something that they don't deserve, or a kindness that was not earned. And Dickens, by the way, was not a Christian per se. He was a theist. He was influenced by Christian faith. He had many fine things to say about Jesus, actually, even in A Christmas Carol. But just to say, however, he knew about grace. You say, well, where's grace? First and foremost, the visit of his nephew Fred.
Oh, yes, Fred.
Fred knows that he's not going to be treated kindly by Scrooge, but he doesn't care. He shows him love. He invites him over. Then there's the grace of Jacob Marley, his former partner, who comes as a spirit, and somehow Jacob Marley has this opportunity for Scrooge to be transformed just out of grace. Bob Cratchit toasts, even though Scrooge is a terrible boss, Bob Cratchit toasts Scrooge in a kind way in their Christmas dinner. And then once again, you have Fred showing up and at his Christmas dinner, he wishes Scrooge a Merry Christmas. He drinks a toast to him. And again, it's nothing that Scrooge deserved or earned, but Scrooge is now observing it. And so he's experiencing grace, people being kind to him. And that has a way of opening our hearts. And it's.
Now, you just read it yesterday, and I can't remember it, but didn't he reject grace originally when Fred came to see him? Didn't he just say, humbug?
Right.
And the guys who wanted him to make a subscription, he got the opposite of grace.
Well, true. He was not interested at first, but as the spirits work on his heart and as he experiences all the things that lead to transformation, eventually he is able to receive the good gifts that are being given to him and open his heart to them. And so again, though it's not a Christian novel, it's actually a marvelous illustration of how grace, that is unmerited kindness, can actually make a difference in people's lives.
By the way, when you reread this every year, do you notice something new every time?
Always. And it's kind of funny, Hugh, because sometimes I'll be reading along and I'll think, wait, was that always in there? And the thing I was noting yesterday was just how many different versions of mulled wine show up in this book. I think there are like 6 different kinds of mulled wine, smoking bishop and negus and all this stuff. And these are the things you see when you've read the thing like 30 times.
Well, you have referenced to me an annotated Dickens. Did they annotate all of Dickens or just A Christmas Carol?
Well, I don't know. Dickens would be an overwhelming challenge. But there is an annotated, and you can find it on Amazon, book. And what's wonderful, it's got the text, but then it has all kinds of footnotes. This is what this means. This is what this means. This is what this means. And it's very helpful for those of us who want to know the story a little more deeply.
All right, don't go anywhere, America. I'm coming right back with Dr. Mark Roberts, who's been my friend forever. And Dr. Roberts was a year behind me at Harvard. He got his PhD from Harvard. He was in the pulpit. He taught down at the Laity Lodge. He's been at the Fuller Seminary as the senior fellow of the Max Dupree Center for Leadership for many, many years. You can find out more at dupree.org. And, of course, we'll post this over at YouTube so you can send it to your friends who are perhaps not as jovial and grateful as they should be on a Christmas Eve in America in this millennium. Dr. Mark Roberts revising a tradition we did back in 2004. 20 plus years ago, Dr. Roberts and I did this show, and it was lost to malware, to a ransomware attack, but we're just redoing it. It's a revival like on Broadway. Dr. Roberts, what evidence do we have that the grace, the unmerited grace that Scrooge received actually changes him?
Well, great question. So, early on, before the last stave, which is the last chapter, when he's transformed, he talks about, he's described as being overcome with penitence and grief because of who he had been. He says to the spirit of the Christmas future, I hope to live to be another man from what I was. I'm not the man I was. I will be the man. I will be a different kind of man, basically. But you say, okay, a lot of times people talk of that way. So what evidence is there? Well, when you get to stave 5, the last chapter, first of all, you see Scrooge's utter joy, freedom, and celebration. That begins to come out early, but he is utterly happy, and he is very childlike. In fact, he describes himself, he says, I'm as light as a feather, I'm as happy as an angel, I'm as merry as a schoolboy, I'm as giddy as a drunken man. He says, I don't know anything, I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care, I'd rather be a baby. So there's this childlike freedom. Also, he's laughing all the time. And what the narrator says, really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. Later, the narrator says that some folks laughed at Scrooge because of this change, but he didn't care. It says his own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. So you have this joy, freedom, laughter as evidence of a changed heart. You certainly have a new way of seeing. He sees himself differently. He sees Christmas differently. He sees what it is to be a boss differently. He sees his life differently. He has learned lessons. So it's not just an emotional thing. It's a new learning, a new way of seeing.
Yeah, and I want to inject here. As I said, George C. Scott's my favorite Scrooge. And the new Scrooge comes to find the men who had asked him for a subscription, and he uttered the famous line, are there no workhouses? Are there no orphanages? And he runs into them. They're almost physically afraid of him. And then he just lets go.
Yes, they are. And in fact, when he tells the man working for him, Bob Cratchit, that he's going to raise his salary, Bob Cratchit is worried too. And the narrator says he grabs a ruler as if to hit him. So this is a real change. And there you just mentioned, he has a new way of relating to people. He relates as a boss differently. He relates as an uncle differently. He greets people on the street. One of my favorite things in the first chapter, it says that the dogs that lead blind people, when they saw Scrooge coming, they would hide and take their person away. And that's in some of the movies. But then at the end, he loves animals. He relates differently. And that means things like he's going to treat his employee more justly and pay a decent wage and that sort of thing. And he's
generous. And Marley, of course, was the opposite of generous. He is weighed down by his greed, his lock boxes of money. And I think the generosity is a counterpoint to the first Ghost.
Well, that is number one for Dickens, because in a way, he wrote this to help people who of means be generous with those in need. And so the clearest evidence for Dickens of real change is generosity. So how do we know that? He sends a giant turkey to the Cratchit family, doesn't even let them know who it comes from. The portly gentleman from the first chapter that he completely turned down. We don't know what the amount is. He whispers in one of their ears what he wants to do, and the guy is blown away by how generous the Scrooge is. Later on, he cares for the Cratchit family. He raises Bob's salary. He assists his struggling family. That's a quote. He helps Tiny Tim, who would have died, but for Scrooge's, I'm sure his finances for medical care, his intervention, Tiny Tim does not die. And the narrator says he became as good a friend, a good a master, a good a man as the good old city knew. And that
30 seconds. How did it sell? I'm always interested in how did it sell.
Yes. Well, it sold 6,000 copies, made available on December 19th. Everyone sold out by December 22nd. That was the beginning. We can talk more in the next section, but that's a good start for a book, don't you think, Hugh?
Oh my
no
gosh.
internet.
Yeah.
No internet to sell it either.
In the modern time, 5,000 copies is a big breakthrough, much less in that few days. I hope you're enjoying Christmas Eve. It is really raining in California. Who knows what the weather is wherever you are, but wherever you are, a Merry Christmas Eve to you. Dr. Mark Roberts, Fuller Theological Seminary and the Dupree Center has joined me, reviving something we did originally in 2004, which is to tap into Dr. Roberts' immense love for and knowledge of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So it sold all the 6,000 copies, Dr. Roberts, right away. What's its impact over the 2+ centuries it's been out? I get not quite 2 centuries.
Well, I mean, if you just looked at sales, just as an idea, they're not sure. The people study this aren't sure how many have actually sold, but it's somewhere, they say, between 20 million and 200 million. So for those for writers, I'd be happy with the low number.
Yeah.
But
what did it do to Dickens?
Well, okay, he didn't get filthy rich on the thing, but he did get steady income, and actually it helped grow his influence because he went all around and would do readings of the whole thing. Like you go and you hear Dickens read, take about 3 hours, and he would read the manuscript. And so it certainly supported his career. But perhaps more interesting, you wonder, if he wrote this to try and help the poor, did it make any difference? And historians have worked on this. I'm not a historian, but I read historians, and it's fascinating. And did it make a difference? Well, first, it's kind of a yes and no. So I'll start with a no. There's really no evidence that A Christmas Carol led immediately to any of the change in laws that really were hurting the poor. There was, at this time in Britain, there were laws that were really meant to punish the poor because it was believed that they had sort of earned their place. It's hard for us to get that, but there were poor laws. And there's no evidence that any of those laws were immediately changed. However, there is lots of evidence that it began to change minds and hearts in thinking about the poor. And many scholars have said what Dickens did was change sort of the worldview, thinking about poverty in such a way that later it led to changing in laws and institutions to help the poor. So immediately,
now, I'll get the timing wrong, but Lord Shaftesbury is running commissions on the poor at the time because the Industrial Revolution is really rough on people. People die in the streets, and many of his characters in his other novels die in doorsteps, poor and penniless. So he is not looking away from the roughness of the Industrial Revolution. But back to him and the impact of the book. Any other evidence of what it did? Did it have a cultural impact?
Yes. I mean, so here's the thing that many of us wouldn't realize. Several years ago, the London Sunday Telegraph had an article on Dickens called "The Man Who Invented Christmas." You say, wait a minute, what does that mean? Well, I mentioned earlier that Christmas wasn't much of a holiday, and it was not celebrated in ways we're familiar with prior to Dickens. The historians of culture say that actually A Christmas Carol significantly changed the way that people in the West, and especially England and the USA, celebrate Christmas. For example, it is now a major holiday. It used to be not. For example, it's seen now mostly as a 1 or 2 day celebration. In the church, it was always a 12-day, but Dickens shortened it. Number 3, Christmas, we think of Christmas ourselves as an occasion for gathering with family and close friends to eat food and have good times together. Before A Christmas Carol, that really didn't happen. Turkey is a big deal to be eaten at Christmas in this book. Before Christmas Carol, people did not eat turkey on Christmas. And again, big point. Christmas is a time for being generous to the poor, even for those who are not Christians. By the way, I think Dickens would love the angel tree thing you're doing because it sort of brings together care for the poor and for the incarcerated. And it's a great Dickensian way to think. But so this whole notion of generosity at Christmas really was hugely from Dickens' vision for it. And the last thing to say is that for him and Scrooge's life, Christmas was a time for personal reflection and growth, even transformation, and that too was new. So the greatest influence that Dickens had on culture was substantially raising the importance of Christmas, substantially changing the way we celebrate it. So much of what we take utterly for granted today was actually something that Dickens himself kind of invented and or took from small pieces of the culture and promoted and made popular.
Can we also make an argument that maybe he made nostalgia for childhood Christmases a thing? Like A Christmas Story is a favorite movie for many people because it's the old nostalgia for Christmases of childhood is a big deal, and it's also unfortunately a point of sorrow for some people.
Right. You know, it certainly could have been. And by the way, on the sorrow, Dickens himself talked about the fact that not in the book, but in some of his letters, that in the context of Christmas, we remember our loved ones who have passed on. And so there is this element of sadness in the remembrance, as well as this nostalgia, delighting in our experiences of Christmas as we are young and sort of reliving them. And I think what Dickens portrayed certainly has encouraged that kind of behavior. And the psychologists would say, if you don't get stuck in the past, but if you sort of relive the past, it actually is a good thing for your brain and for your body.
Random question. I grew up Catholic, going to the midnight mass, and many people still do. I don't do that anymore. I'll make, I think, 8 o'clock services tonight. Did the Anglican Church adopt a midnight mass? Was midnight mass a thing before Dickens?
You know, I am not sure of that on the Anglicans. You know, the Catholics have been pretty faithful with that sort of thing for like centuries and centuries. But I don't know if the Anglicans did or not. I mean, what I do know is that Dickens' influence helped sort of to bring together the religious celebration of Christmas and the birth of Jesus and some of the secular things that previously had been perceived and experienced as being very sort of opposed.
Okay, don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with Dr. Mark Roberts. If you want, we will have this uploaded tonight over at my YouTube channel, so you can send it to your friends and loved ones who perhaps don't know much about A Christmas Carol and inspire them to go out and get it. You can even, given what Mark's told us, you can read it in 3 hours out loud if you're a good reader. Merry Christmas Eve to all of you, and to Harley and to Adam, and of course Generalissimo, everyone who listens to the program, to Danielle and Diana who make it work behind the scenes, everyone at Salem. Dr. Mark Roberts is my guest. I have a off-the-wall question, which is, we did this first in 2004. More than 2 decades later, we're different people, lots of different life experiences for both of us in that period of time. How have you changed your understanding of it and of the story it tells?
Well, I think I would say 2 things. And one is, you and I are both older, and I am much more aware now than I was at the time of the opportunity and challenges for older adults to live flourishing lives that make a difference in this world. And I'm actually, in my work at the Dupree Center and at Fuller, I'm really focusing on what we call the third of life. From that perspective, there are many things in A Christmas Carol that are significant for older adults who want to flourish. For example, we mentioned already the power of nostalgia, and there's a lot of research on that it's not necessarily bad to go back and remember your past, as long as you let that inform who you are today. Dickens emphasizes the importance of relationships versus isolation. Scrooge had been isolated, he becomes relationships. The Harvard Study of Human Development says the most important thing if you want to flourish as you get older are your relationships, especially intergenerational relationships like Scrooge and Tiny Tim. There's lots of evidence on the value of play and celebration for older adults, and that helps them to flourish. But, and this is where it really gets important, the importance of some kind of purpose beyond yourself. So not just getting rich as the early Scrooge, but a purpose of helping and serving people, living beyond yourself in retirement. And that also, generosity is central to that. And many of us who are older of course, we're looking at our finances and trying to figure out how we're going to do in the next, how many years, could be 20 or more. But there's an opportunity often for us to be generous. And, and again, the angel tree thing, great example. Your other posts on the radio have other kinds of opportunities. And so if we can take kind of the life of Scrooge and this story and say, one of the things we learn is what we can do if we want to live well as we get older. And yet those lessons are as relevant to people who are younger as older. And so maybe the great lesson of this little story is that when our hearts are transformed, we live to serve others. We live for the sake of others. It's not just about ourselves, what we accumulate, or our knowledge, or even our own happiness. We live to be generous. We live to give. We live to invest our lives in others. And that's a lesson that's great for Christmas, for sure, but for any season.
Absolutely. And I want to tell our audience, tomorrow on Christmas Day, I'm not live. We have N.T. Wright, Bishop Wright, on all of these radio stations. Yeah. And then Kurt Schlichter will be in for me after the following weeks. But thank you, Generalissimo. Thank you, Adam and Harley. And a special thanks to my long and dear friend, Dr. Mark Roberts, for reprising our conversation from 2004, Lost to the Ransomware People. Merry Christmas. God rest ye all, you merry gentlemen. Enjoy